What's up, everyone? Today I wish to discuss the movie The Black Panther. I recently saw it, and I was moved to do a video about the movie. It was an amazing movie to watch. I'm sure many of you have seen it by this point, and so I won't go into many details that can be easily seen by watching it. But I wish to break down what I saw to be the brilliance of this movie and some other issues I had with the movie as well. The first thing I wish to speak about is its brilliance. Number one, the fact that we have a major motion picture movie showing a full black cast made of characters with layers of character range, not simple flat characters of Superfly or the mystical magical Negro or the angry black woman, but layered characters leading a film. Just that visual experience as a black man was thrilling to see. And to see that we have a culture in the movie, a culture unique to black people. And the culture was not derided, it was not cooned, it was not samboed, it was not enslavery type of visuals, but high technology, high kingdom, high empire with social systems and technologies and healing abilities and intelligence. My goodness, absolutely thrilling to see. And I'm sure that all of the youth watching this will now have in their minds visions of what they can be, visions of what's possible. The movie, by showing this kind of view of black people, even though it's a fictional story, Wakanda is not a real actual place in Africa, but that really doesn't matter on a very deep level. Luke Skywalker didn't exist in real life, and the Force and these powers and these other sci-fi movies don't exist in the real world. But what they did was they put, particularly in the minds of white people, little white children in particular, dreams of what they can become. It opened their mental space to one day we can make an R2D2 robot in our houses. Or perhaps we'll have time travel like in the movie Dune. Space travel, I mean, in the movie Dune. Or time travel like in Back to the Future. Even though these are movies that are fictional, they have a deep, powerful impact on opening imaginal space. And eventually, generations following seeing those movies will generate children who take seriously, well, I wonder if time travel is possible. They go to school, they study, they become engineers, and they begin to work on these ideas. And the next thing you know, poof, I wouldn't be surprised if it actually happens. So the value of fantasy, of imagination, and inspiring bubbles of possibility where there were none before in the minds of a people is a key power. It's a real power. We call this power heteru. So the movie inspires particularly little black children, their heteru, their imagination, their mind's eye with dreams and possibilities. And I'm eager to see how black children begin to ground from fantasy into some level of actual reality the dreams and possibilities in this movie. For that alone, for opening the imaginal space of little black children alone, this movie is worth its weight in gold. May it make $10 billion for 10 billion years. To see the variety of African cultures in the movie, we had beautiful brothers and sisters from different nations in the movie, different kingdoms, how they looked, their clothes, their traditions. It showed a respect of Africa's variety. You see, the first empire, an empire means a group of nations held together by a foreign power, imperialism. The first emperor was Sargon I of Akkad in 2400 BC. He was an Aryan, a Semitic Aryan who began to conquer foreign lands and hold them under his rule as a foreigner. So between the years 4000 and 2000 BC, we had mostly the great black empires: Kemet, Indus Kush, Sumer, Phoenicia, Canaan. Let's see, basically those, Ethiopia. The great black empires of the ancient world didn't have great battles with each other. There were no world wars amongst them. There were skirmishes here and there over trade routes and political issues, but never did we have genocidal war and complete destruction. That came with the Aryans, with King Sargon I of Akkad around 2400 BC. What I'm saying is that before that, when the great black nations ruled the earth, there was a general feeling of acceptance and tolerance. It was not a kind of genocidal, I'll kill your whole nation. I may not like you or like things about you, but we can still get along well enough. To shake a man's hand doesn't mean I must shake a man's heart. So they got along well enough. And they showed this original African not imperial, but African rulership inclusivity in the movie, when different nations could challenge the king for the throne. That's a very different view of world politics than we have in Europe, where it's highly competitive and highly bloody. So, those are the main points that were dynamic for me in the movie, as well as, of course, the view of women. Here we have, again, women, black women of many hues, with a lot of dark, beautiful sisters. The dark skin, the sun-kissed skin, was predominant. They were the lead. Now, this has never happened. The only TV show I can recollect had that was How to Get Away with Murder. Yes, where the lead is a very beautifully sun-kissed dark sister. But that's not normal. If you look at most commercials, most movies, most TV shows, the women tend to be more pale. In this movie, the powerful central female characters were all sun-kissed, beautifully deep chocolate. So that was so refreshing to see. And that the women had diversity of characterization. The women were warriors. They were the key warriors. This ties into the beginning of the movie with the goddess Bast, who's a cat goddess, and cats are predators. And the whole world would not argue with you if you say that cats are a feminine spirit. So they were allowing to come forth the invocation of Bast, who can become Sekhmet, the she-lion. And that the females were very, not only physically powerful and skilled at the arts of war, but they were shown as the most intelligent people. The king's sister was a genius. She was the head of technology, also a warrior, and that they had this range. So it was just delicious and refreshing to watch. So those are the main points, and for those reasons, I will forever support this movie. I want to see 10 million more of these movies come out. And I want to see the whole world again become entranced by these kinds of visuals and storylines. The visuals were fantastic in the movie. The special effects were flawless. It was visually thrilling to watch. So I want to make that very clear from the beginning. I'm going to go into things that I feel they can improve and work on, but that's all in the context of that this was a brilliant movie. History making in many ways. The fact that it made so much money will now allow the bankrolling of many more such black movies. Many more such indie black movies can get bankrolled. It changes the game completely. Now, the things that I had a few recommendations for to the future writers. Number one, we must not forget the movie was developed. The storyline was developed by a white male. Stan Lee is a white male. And I could see that in the movie storyline. There were things that I said only a white male who didn't do clear history on this theme would write. I know it's a comic book. It is not a historical tome. It's a comic book. It's a comic book series. So I don't mean to weigh and measure it against the levels of high level academic scholarship on history. But we must make commentary where we can to help hopefully improve such movies in the future. My goal with these critiques is to, if anyone of power wishes to listen, to give them ideas as to what they can do to improve the movie, to make it even better. I'm basically saying how to polish a diamond so it's even brighter, but trust me, it is a diamond of great value to not only black people, but to the world, because it also opens the imagination of white people, Asian people, Native American people, to see black people in a different way. So the imaginal power of this is worth its weight in gold. Now, the first thing I want to say to give improvement to the movie's storyline, if this is the interest of the writers, the main problem I had with the movie was the depiction of African royalty. To me, that was the core problem with the movie. Basically, we have the king, that was, I believe, T'Chaka, the first king, the Black Panther's father, the one who got killed at the UN explosion. Well, he came to the US, and his brother, who was undercover as a spy in the US, was killed by the king, his brother. So we had a fratricide here. So the king kills his brother and leaves his nephew, the murdered brother's son, behind. Then the king refuses to speak about what he has done back home in Wakanda, and even in the afterlife, when the king becomes a deceased ancestor, he still resists confessing what he did. That's a rather scathing commentary on black male ultimate leadership in the beginning of the movie. It's depicting this king of the most advanced nation on the planet as immoral, particularly not particularly by him leaving his nephew alone without a father whom he just murdered. Why did he leave the boy? He could have taken the boy, raised the boy, cared for the boy, as the very least he could do for that child. The fact he left the boy, who later grew up to become Eric Killmonger, sets the main tone of the story. The rage of abandonment that this boy felt, that when he saw the spaceship fly away, he knew it was from his Wakandan roots. They killed his father, left him alone to survive by himself in a very dangerous, racist world. He was enraged. And that drove half the storyline of why he went back to Wakanda to become the king, to challenge the throne, and to change the whole game of Wakanda. So I did not like that they showed this original king as immoral, thoughtless, without foresight. By the same token, when I saw Angela Bassett's character as the Queen Mother, I believe it was Ramonda is her name, she was shown beautiful, beautiful and stunning, but of little actual power, although she was Queen Mother. Now, I'm saying this from me being a king, me knowing African kings, and actually knowing African Queen Mothers, me having gone to Africa and met such people. I know the entire basis of the system of African royalty. Number one, in African traditional royalty, kings must have wisdom. Wisdom is an important part of being a king. This wisdom component is embodied in kings following oracles. All African kings follow some kind of oracle, some kind of spiritual divination system. So they did not show any of that wisdom institution that is absolutely attached to kingship. Okay? They're either throwing shells or seed pods or bones, something. The kings always have their council of diviners. This is very African, not at all European. It's the kings have diviners and they have counselors who may or may not be diviners. There are two different categories of counselors: the divination counselors and then the court counselors who may or may not be diviners. This prevents kings from doing clearly stupid things, like in this movie's case, leaving the son of the man you just murdered in the belly of the beast of the racist USA. So that was very disturbing. They're saying the king was stupid and had no foresight and had no character. He wouldn't confess. So he had no ethics, no moral fiber here. This is a questionable king in terms of his character. And even in death, he was not an honorable ancestor. He was still perpetrating a fraud. So it really spoke poorly about African kingship. And that Angela's role, and I can't think of any one traditional African system where the right of becoming king is not matriarchal. You see, when another main problem with the movie was that they used a battle for the kingship. I don't know of any African culture. There may be some, but I don't know of any. None of the major African cultures or empires of the ancient world did this. No place was muscle, a wrestling match, a battle scene, the way you got the crown. Now, it may have happened where people came in and just robbed the crown through might over right, but the tradition was matrilineal blessing of the next king, that the queen mother crowns the next king. She determines the next king. That was the way it was in ancient Kemet. And in many African cultures, the matrilineal blessing is what made you king. This prevented, particularly in Kemet, the infiltration of a usurper. You must be from the king's mother's line. So it's the mother and her children, or the mother and her sister's children. Only the mother's children or the mother's sister's children, her nephews, the mother's nephew, the queen mother's nephews, can become eligible for kingship. And the queen mothers would decide among either her children or her nephews who gets the crown. So you can't just run up in there and say, I'm the heir and I'm going to fight for the throne. So that historical fallacy was a driving point of the story, because the young boy who was left in America, who became Eric Killmonger, came into Wakanda and said, I'm going to fight for the throne. I watched this scene, I was laughing, said, what Africa is this? So to me, that was more of a Roman overlay. You see, in the white cultures, the ancient white cultures, you can come in and just take over the throne. You fight, you have the muscle, you become the next emperor, Caesar or Augustus or whoever you are. So that was a very foreign political system or structure brought to an African royal lineage. Now, that may have given drama to the storyline. Again, I'm not trying to make this a historically based movie. It's not even claiming to be so. It's fictional. I'm just giving commentary. Nowhere in Africa does might overrule right as the way to get leadership. You need wisdom, and you need your mother or your aunt to bless you to be the next leader. It creates social stability and a peaceful transition of power between kings and their heirs. Now, also, Angela, her character, had no power. Once her son was thrown over the cliff, she went off into exile. Well, that's not very African either, because if you watch the movie Shaka Zulu, if you look at the story of Akhenaten, that heretic, I call him Akhenaten, that heretic king who basically destroyed the Kemetic system. In the movie Shaka Zulu, the queen mothers had a lot of power. They were sorceresses, they were women of magical power, they had influence in terms of politics. And if you crossed them, they would put a voodoo on you. That's a lot of power. So they didn't show the queen mother as she actually is in Africa, a woman filled with mysterious powers and forces that she will use to protect her children and her family and her kingdom. In the age of Akhenaten, the first Kun of the ancient Kemetic world, of historical note, that if you look at that time period, when he went against the Amun tradition, the women, they were called the wives of Amun. These were the great high priestesses and the queen mother and her high priestesses of Amun. The hidden one means Amun. The stories talk about, the histories talk about, these women did voodoo. We call it praying. They pray to Amun against Akhenaten. And the priests of Amun went after him. But the women, the wives of Amun, had a lot of influence, hidden influence, to get him off that throne, to get the usurper off the throne. He wasn't a usurper. He was actually, by birth, king, but he was a traitor king. So they weren't going to have it, and they got him off the throne. Then King Tut became the king, and they made him change his name from Tutak, Tutank Atum to Tutank Amun. They made him change back to the Amun system. So we have these women in similar kind of takeover, political takeover scenes in African history, not taking this and laying down. So it really hurt my heart to see Angela so weak, not having any powers of any import when her country's being destroyed. So now, Eric Killmonger. Okay. His character I actually found quite flat. I found him one dimensional. What drove him was anger and rage. Anger and rage, anger and rage. And the rage, his father, who was killed by King T'Chaka, by his brother in the beginning of the movie, the father was shown having guns in his house and similar to a Black Panther movement, going to fight the power and arm himself, etc. So the father of Eric Killmonger was shown in the movie to be somewhat of a revolutionary, a Black Power revolutionary. I have never read the comic books of Black Panther. I don't read comic books, so I don't know if it's in the comic book storyline. It may be. I'm just going from the movie that I watched. But there was very little reference to Eric Killmonger being a Black revolutionary. His father was, admirably so. But Eric was shown more as just an angry boy, mad that his father was killed, which is a very good reason to be angry. Most valid reason to be angry. And wanted revenge against his father's murderer and those who enabled it. So his whole storyline is really, to me, the flattest, the most one-dimensional of all the main characters in the movie. I had wished that Eric had more layers. For example, it's possible he could have, with his rage, rather than allying with a white South Afrikaner and going in to dismantle the government, he could have said, I'm going to somehow get to Wakanda. I'm going to state my case to the court. I'm sure the Wakandans had legal systems if they had all this technology. Why didn't Eric go to Wakanda with his gripe, an honest and sincere gripe? Do you know that King T'Chaka killed my father, left me there alone to fend for myself, to suffer by myself? Don't I Should I not have reparations? Should I not have compensation? What say ye, great court of Wakanda? And then the Wakandans' legal system and ethical system could have been revealed in the storyline. But of course, that makes for a lot less drama in terms of story. But I understand we've got to make a movie and it's got to be engaging. It's just commentary. So the fact that he didn't think of that, that it was just blind rage and revenge, Eric, I don't see in the movie that his cause was directly for black people. It was implied by him wanting to bomb America, bomb all the nations that hurt us. Okay, so he did have this view of helping the people, but what drove him as a character mainly was the abandonment of his own people, of him. Okay, so I just want to see Eric try different methods of resolution of his issue. Go to Wakanda and say, listen, I was left there in a very racist society. Why don't you come? What happened? Now you see what I'm a Wakandan who's telling you what black people are going through in America. Shouldn't we do something? That could have been a storyline also. And then a whole different story arc could have happened where Eric and T'Challa could have united and allied, and he could have used Eric's insight into the system, the Western systems, to help people. Rather than that, we have a brother against brother. And I'm simply stating that that didn't have to be the storyline. It would have been equally interesting and exciting to watch how they allied with each other and worked together. I just hate seeing brothers fighting like this when they didn't have to. Okay, now the part about, let's discuss the white characters for a minute. We had Claw and the FBI agent. Okay, Claw was well depicted. A vulgar, racist pig, greedy for power and resources of Africa. Okay, so that was fine. That's how it has been in history, and he was well depicted. And he was shot by Eric Killmonger, and his evil plans came to naught. That was refreshing to see that the European rapists of Africa getting their just comeuppance, getting what's their due. So that was refreshing to see. Then we have the FBI agent. He was very problematic for me primarily because he's FBI. Or was he CIA? He was CIA, I believe it was. But he was working directly for the US government. And there were scenes, for example, when the Black Panther's sister, who's the great technology genius, used him to help shoot down the ships that were going to go out and bomb black people's enemies around the world. And she also, in the scene after she healed him, began to discuss technological details with him. No, listen. What nation discuss with the FBI, CIA, it was CIA, the CIA equivalent, their in-house technological secrets? No one discusses those things. You don't discuss those secrets with foreigners. So that was so strange, glaringly so. And they portrayed the CIA agent as somewhat likable, a kind of good cop. Well, from history's books, nowhere was the CIA ever a friend to black revolutionary movements. Never. So it kind of opened a weird thing in the minds of people that, when black people become powerful, we should embrace CIA types, trust them, and believe they have our best interests at heart. That's a very dangerous message. Very dangerous. I didn't like it at all. Even though there were scenes where they told him to shut up and know your place and sit down. Okay, that was good to watch. When powerful black people are telling white people, remember your place. But worse than that is they were letting a CIA agent into their inner secrets. That's so ridiculous to me. It's almost beyond words. Then he was instrumental in shooting down the planes that were going to kill the oppressors of black people around the world in the diaspora. The message being told here is that when black people become powerful, we should let white people in to prevent us from stopping white oppression around the world. It's a weird statement that does not serve black people. There's no nation on earth that if they bombed America, America would not strike back. It's just not going to happen. Americans would strike back. If the Middle East attacked us, Obama attacked us, Bin Laden attacked us, are we going to shoot down the American ships that are going to bomb Iraq or the Middle East or wherever? Come on. So that was a very, you see what they're doing here is in this wonderful movie, they're embedding at core moments, core arc line story themes, messages to make sure blacks, when you get your full power back, you still think you need us. You see, racism has two basic tenets. One is, or two basic illusions that give it power. One is that whites are superior to blacks, therefore blacks are inferior to whites. That's the first tenet for it to even exist. Second is that blacks can't exist without whites. That we can't do anything really without whites coming in as the great white hope in some level. Now, if you erase those two fallacies, those two lies, that whites are superior and that blacks can't be anything without them, then you can't have a racism system. It just falls apart. So, by letting the CIA agent in to our military, he was armed. T'Challa's sister armed him with guns, gun technologies. And he was pivotal to shooting down the warships that were going to stop oppression around the world. You see, it's saying that we need white people. If we're going to be militarily powerful, we're going to need a white person somewhere in that system. Is that true? I don't think it is. We were ruling the world for thousands of years without white people in our seats of power and military might, and we were just fine. In fact, we didn't have world wars. So that was one of the most insidious, sneaky, subliminal seductions in the movie. Okay? Now, the next part I wish to talk about is the beginning, where we have the whole basis of this vibranium falling to the earth and the goddess Bast giving them these technologies and things. Bast is a cat goddess, but there is the panther goddess in Egypt. Her name is Paket. I discussed her in my video on the solar eclipse of 2018, the full solar eclipse over the USA in 2018. And I talked the Black Pantheress is coming, and that women are going to rise up. And we had not long after the eclipse, the Me Too movement, the hashtag Time's Up movement. That was my prophecy of the Black Panther, the she panther, coming. And that women are going to rise up this year and they're going to strike back. So we have a goddess named Paket, Paket, which means the flame. Pa means the, Ket means fire. So Paket means the black fire. So I don't know why they chose Bast when there was an actual goddess who was a Black Panther goddess. So there was a little bit of mystery of the mythological deities of Kemet. The deities of Kemet, yes. But the whole basis of the Wakandan government was technology. I didn't see much spirituality in this movie, which is very African. That it was all technology oriented, and the only reference was Bast, but it was very slight in the beginning and quickly passed over. Whereas in the great African empires like Kemet and Kush, their great powers of technology, like building pyramids and moving 40-ton stones and erecting obelisks and making dams, and those are great feats of technology, the Kamau will tell you were granted by their gods. I wish there was more connection in the movie between the military, technological, economic, and social genius of Wakanda and their divinity, their spiritual systems. There was very little about their spiritual systems in the movie, which is very un-African. Spirituality pervades every facet and every institution in true African cultures. Now, this brings me to the scene with those blue flowers that gave the Black Panther his powers. Okay. Although I like the fact that they're talking about the use of some kind of voodoo roots. I like that part because the flower is a kind of voodoo root that grants powers to black people. This is true. The Haitian Revolution proves this because they used voodoo to defeat Napoleon and the British armies. But I wish they added more because, as the movie showed during the battle scenes for kingship, there was an antidote that the Black Panther could drink that would strip him of his powers, remove his powers. What I didn't like about this blue flower, which is clearly the blue lotus of Egypt, that the power that makes black men potent is outside of them. That it's some source outside of black men. That black men have to take some external thing to get the power versus the power being innate in him, being innate in the brother. If you put the locus of power within him, it can't be stripped. And this is the consequence of not having the African gods being the source of Wakanda's power. It was very white in that it was making technology their power, but that's not black people's source of power. Our power is our link to God, to the gods, to the divine world. They showed it a bit with the ancestors, and I love that they showed that. But it was very minimal to me, whereas in African reality of ancient empires and even modern African kingdoms, my goodness, the gods are permeating every corner and crevice of politics, technology, government, law, healthcare. It's everywhere. And we saw that Eric Killmonger burnt those blue flowers. So what does that mean? That black men no longer can get the power? Are we now powerless? So I didn't like locating black male power, real leadership power, outside of me. Okay. Now, let's discuss the ending with Eric Killmonger on the cliff when he committed harakiri, basically, suicide, and said, I'd rather drown with my ancestors, like they did in America, than to be held prisoner in Wakanda for what I have done. I could not stand that scene. I hated it. Because, number one, although I love the fact that they were trying to bring in a respect for the ancestors in the terrorism trade, what they call the slave trade, but it was terrorism, who jumped ship rather than become slaves. What that sentence that Eric Killmonger said to T'Challa was implying was that his black brother, the Black Panther, is equivalent to a white terrorist slave master. I don't call them slave masters, I call them slave monsters. He was equating, now listen to me very carefully, he was equating King T'Challa to a white slave monster. Now that's a stretch. Now that's rude. There's no way there's an equivalence. It is a very, like I said, he's a rather shallow character to me. And that wasn't a very layered thought process. And it was a vulgar equivalency. He basically called T'Challa Hitler, which is a stretch, hyperbole, insult beyond belief. I couldn't believe he said it. So again, they tried to put this, oh, he's going to link with the slaves that jumped ship. We weren't slaves, we were prisoners of war. My grandmother, great grandmother, great 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 grandfather were never slaves. They were noble people, noble Africans. They were simply prisoners of war. I will not describe my ancestors as slaves. They were prisoners of war. That T'Challa was nowhere near that level of viciousness and cruelty, and in fact, T'Challa saved him. He could have killed him down in that those magnetic train things were happening. He actually saved him. So clearly, the fact that he tried to save Eric Killmonger makes him far from a slave monster, a white slave monster. So that went over the board for me. That was way out of line. And it feeds into a kind of verbiage I've heard white people say, blacks had slaves too, and they enslaved. It's a whole different level. We didn't do genocide. We didn't wipe out whole groups of people. They're they're equating basically hand robbery with genocide. I mean, it's a whole. They're both crimes. This is true, but it's a whole other level we're talking about. So that was a very sloppy wording and storyline there. Now, the very end of the movie, King T'Challa is shown back at Compton or somewhere in American California, and he's going to buy a bunch of buildings on a block. Okay. What bothered me about that scene, this is the king of Wakanda. What he's stating at the end of the movie is he's an integrationist. You see, Eric Killmonger was a separatist. He did not want to integrate. He wanted to destroy the enemy. The same thing that white Americans want to do to Middle Eastern enemies to America. They don't want to integrate with, become Arab or study Islam and follow Allah. They're not talking about let's integrate with uh, the religion of Allah. So why are the blacks integrating with those who oppress them? It was a very slick integrationist storyline at the very end of the movie. King T'Challa could have clearly gotten land in Africa, offered it to blacks in America or Haiti or wherever they are in the diaspora, said, listen, I'm King T'Challa. I want to give you land and resources and power in your motherland, Africa. You can leave Compton if you like. We'll make a super advanced culture for you that will rival America in Africa, run by vibranium, and you can have your own world. He had the power to do that. He's the king of Wakanda. But why did he choose to integrate on the soil of black people's historical enemy? It was a clear integrationist ethic. And it turned my stomach. I said, what leader would do that? As opposed to getting their own land and building on their own continent. Who does this? It was a very subversive to black power movements statement. So, for those reasons, I wish to speak with the voice that I have. The movie was brilliant. I wouldn't wish it away for anything. But I wish for the audience to think about not only the wonderful main storyline, but the sub storylines and their hidden subliminal messages to black people. You see? Even the movie, when they showed that the Eric Killmonger's ally in the court, that chief of the army, he became Eric's ally to take over the throne out of vindictive personal issues. And of course, ego and personal issues are everywhere. It doesn't mean you're black or white or Asian. It's human. So that happens. That's a normal thing. I wasn't too bothered by that. But again, they showed a major black male, which was the head of the army there, as morally corrupt. You see, they're showing black men in a funny way. They showed King T'Chaka as morally corrupt, weak, and of low moral character. They showed Eric Killmonger as just a killmonger, a killing spree, not thoughtful. They showed the head of the army as a questionable black man. There were these subtle digs at black men throughout the movie. And the main goal, you see, the one group that white people need to fear in terms of black history are the Egyptians, the Kamal. It's the only group of black people that the whites really are afraid of because they know the white culture took their system from Africa, from Egypt, from Kemet. So the source is greater than an offshoot. So what I'm saying in this sentence is that the rise of the pharaohs and the queen mothers, the lord of the double crown and the queen of the vultures, which is the king and the queen mother. She was the queen. She wore a vulture crown, primarily a vulture crown. It is those royals, the Kemetic royals, that can fix racism. They can handle Set. They can handle white people. They can handle white oppression. So to me, the movie kept digging at black men, future pharaohs, particularly black men in powerful leadership positions. They kept digging in these Eric is wild and vicious and against his own, and the king is immoral and corrupt even in death, and even Forrest Whitaker's character didn't tell the truth, so he's morally corrupt. That part really, really disgusted me. Okay? So, in terms of the king, King T'Challa, he was well depicted. He was layered, he had ethics. So, the main character of the story did have these virtues of moral character, fighting strength, loyalty to his people, even to his own father in the afterlife. He challenged his ancestral father's spirit. So there was a lot of redeeming of the view of black powerful men in King T'Challa, the Black Panther himself. I just wish his powers were not from outside of him, but from within him. Maybe the flower could have amplified what's in him, and once amplified, forever it's amplified and cannot be taken away. But I understand in many Marvel comic characters, they have a nemesis, kryptonite, or some kind of power that can neutralize them. So it may be just a thing of the Marvel characters universe. I don't read comic books. I don't know. I'm just going to say that as a commentary. But looking at the movie, I didn't like it, that this flower gave black men their powers. Now, the king, I forget his name in the movie. He was the king of the monkey tribe. Now, okay, do I have to say it? Do we have to have black men as monkeys in a black movie? I said, oh, please. They did not just do that. They did not just show a whole nation of black people as monkeys. Now, in Africa, in Kemet, his name was Aon, the great monkey baboon god. He's a fierce power. I understand that. But of all the animals to make a bunch of black people, monkeys should be the last on the list. That smacked of racism to me, left, right, and center. Again, the storyline was written by white men or white men, and this storyline of a nation of monkey people was, I couldn't believe it happened. And why not? It could have been crocodiles or serpent or cobra or eagle or uh, the gazelle. I don't care what, just not monkeys. Let's not go there. Then there was a scene when the CIA agent was talking to the Monkey King, and the Monkey King said, you need to be quiet, know your place, and sit down. Then, after saying that to him, he laughed and joked. Now, wait a minute now. You are a king, and this foreigner just interrupted you. You shut him up, then you minimize it by joking with him. What king does that on his throne? I'm the king and you're going to shut up. That's it. There's no apologizing, no minimizing it with a joke. So when black men checked white men in the movie, in many cases, it was minimized. This also happened in the scene, not with a black man, but when the head of the female warriors was with King T'Challa in the CIA office, and the CIA agent touched King T'Challa on his shoulder or something, and she spoke in Wakandese that if he touches you again, I'll have to break his arm. I asked myself, why did she have to tell that to the king in Wakandese? Why couldn't she tell the white man to his face, do it again, I'll break your fingers? So to me, that theme of apologizing, um, minimizing, speaking in a foreign tongue, making a joke after checking a white man. Mm-mm. Just check him. What is he? He's got two arms, two legs like you. What is he? He's out of place, out of line. You're royalty. Could you imagine someone up and touching the Queen of England? Her CIA, her whatever they call it in England, her security would be on you so fast. And there's no apology, there's no minimizing it. You will be dealt with quite quickly. So again, that was a subtle little, you don't confront the white men too directly. A little bit of a yes, a massa kind of vibe to me. I didn't like it. Although it was funny and brilliantly written, I didn't like it. So I'm trying to scan here this image on the screen to see are there any characters I wished to make sure I didn't miss. I believe those are all the main points to the movie from what I saw. So I pray this was useful to all of you. Again, I wish to make clear I love the movie and I look forward to seeing more and more and more of these movies and many of its iterations with the improvements. Long live Black Panther, and I wish to encourage all black people to enjoy Wakanda, a fictional African nation, but let your joy of Wakanda lead you to actual Africa, actual living, real time on this earth, non fictional African histories, traditions, and empires. If Wakanda simply inspires black people to go home spiritually, to embrace their root cultures more than you do Wakanda, support African knowledge, African traditions, African travel, African uh, language, African gods. The money you gave to Stan Lee and company, may Black Panther inspire you to give to actual black people who live in Africa. And there was one last dynamic I wish to cover, a very important one. The conversation between continental Africans and diasporic Africans. The story talked about this, particularly with Eric Killmonger. Where was Africa when black people outside of Africa needed help? That storyline is a key one. It's a conversation that I'm sure many black people have had with themselves or in thinking about Africa and Africans towards those who were taken by the slave monsters. Well, there are a few points I want to make on that conversation. It's an important conversation to have. Some have said, well, Africa did not really help American, black, diasporic or stolen Africans. But we must remember that also Africa was raped by the slave monsters also. She was crippled and poisoned and debilitated. So her capacity to reach out and help her people was severed by the white slave monsters. Okay, so she couldn't do her full reach out programs. And many Africans of power, kings and queen mothers in Africa, welcome black people to Africa, will give Note the word give, Give. Give you land, won't even charge you for it. See here's a plot of land for you. Do what you wish. So there actually already is a strong love of Africans on the continent for black people in America by people of power, leadership, traditionalists. And we need to know that. I know kings and queens that offer these things to people, and there are many powerful Africans who are open to black Americans coming home. So I don't want to make it too accusatory why Africa didn't so-called help black people. They were shot in the head too, and they're being raped by a lot of white countries. The Congo being raped by the Belgians and the De Beers and the Diamonds, South Africa. They're raping and taking all the resources of Africa. It's destabilizing African social systems and leadership systems. The kingship was removed. Then we have presidents versus kings and queens. So a lot's been happening on the continent, making them unable to come save us properly. But they're doing a lot of good work to help us. But we must also reach out to them, respect them, get to know them, and honor their traditions. And form bridges, form alliances. That's why I wish that Eric Killmonger and T'Challa could have worked together to stop slave monstery and stop the oppression versus brother against brother. I hated seeing that brother against brother storyline. Okay, so again, I pray this was useful to you all and may it inspire your thought. May some of you who are listening, who may be the future writers of these movies and the future producers of these movies, remember some of these points and make a brilliant movie even better. So, Dwa'u, I wish to thank the gay African ancestors that rule my throne and the fact that there were no gay people in this movie. That's another story. We didn't exist. So that's a storyline of the future projecting that we don't exist. But that's not going to happen. We do exist, we shall exist, and we shall be in the movies eventually when a heterosexual thinks it's a good time. And that omission, whether it's for sales purposes or heteroinsecurity issues, we don't want to show the first black movie of power with gay people. Why? Why not? What's the problem? You can show crazy Killmonger black men. Okay, then why can't you can show powerful Amazonian black women? We had a range. The wild, angry, vengeful one to the most noble, elegant black woman. There was a range of black. Well, gay is part of black people. So, in the next movie, there'll be my people in the movie in positions of power, leadership, and respect. So, enjoy watching the Black Panther over and over and over and support black theater, black movies, particularly cultural ones and ancestral ones. Dwawend Hotepu.